Okay.
Are you advertising?
So we're ready.
No, no.
Izzy.
We can't do
We're
it.
ready, yeah.
We can't do that. That's why
Okay,
I brought
I'm
that.
ready. And you can hear. Do you need to do any testing?
I just need to. Can you just talk at the volume you're going to be speaking?
Yeah, and you need to put that on, so then we just talk at the volume we're going to be speaking. I'll probably speak about like this, if that's all
And
right.
I'll probably speak about like this. Getting everybody.
So you got all of
Bring
us?
Robert down a bit,
Bring
Bring
Robert
me down. Bring me
so
down.
to speak.
I'm down now.
So down, man. Here, I'll sign those.
Instead of going, you're awesome,
These are
it's
the
like,
most fun part of
instead of
the interview,
validation.
right?
I know it. It's
instead of
so true.
validation, it's going to bring you down.
It's
like,
always the
you,
best. Yeah.
You stink. You're
So
terrible.
what was that thing about IX excuse you were telling me?
Well, I was
about?
saying that, one of the interesting, cute things about, our history
Right.
in NLP was that when we were doing the eye accessing cues, Robert and I gazed into each other's eyes
Right.
that first time, looking for, accessing
Visual or
cues,
auditory kind of stuff.
kinesthetic accessing cues, and fell in love, of course. and then my memory too is when we were modeling Erickson, that I remember clearly being at some house up in the mountains here.
Yeah.
I don't even remember where that was, but Robert put me in my first official trance. Yeah.
Okay, like I said, there's three questions about past.
Yeah.
Did you realize, or was there a feeling that you were creating something as structured as NLP at that time?
Well, for me, there was. For me, I had this feeling, because I was a college student at the time, and I've been studying people like Aristotle and William James and all these people. And so I was very much steeped in this idea, this sort of the intellectual history of psychology and stuff. And what we were doing, nobody had done, and yet it seemed to be just as basic and powerful. So for me, it was kind of like this sense of, wow, it really felt like we were onto something. And of course, Bandler and Grinder were very much that, encouraged that,
Yeah.
We're onto something, and nobody else is doing it.
Yeah. For me, I came to NLP because I fell in love with John Grinder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Okay. That's cool.
Is that good?
People need to eat as well?
This is for everybody. Yeah, we'll just enjoy all of this together.
There's your quiche.
Yeah. Help
So you
yourself.
fell in love with John Grinder.
So
that
yeah,
was-
I was not involved in NLP. I was doing my degree in religious studies and comparative religion and anthropology, and I was living in a house actually, and John and Richard. This was like in that first year of their connection.
Yeah.
John and Richard were having Wednesday meetings in this house. Well, I happened to work on Wednesday night because I was, working my way through university, waiting tables over the hill in Saratoga. And, but, John and I began to date. And so I got involved kind of from that position. But my pathway was comparative religion and anthropology at the time. And John gave me The Structure of Magic when it was in a manuscript form just before it was published, which was the first NLP book published. And he just said, would you read this and tell me what you think? And when I read that book, it was not easy for me to read. It wasn't the kind of reading that I was doing in university, But I read it and I had this deep sense that people will be able to evolve themselves
Through
this knowledge. Because as I read the book and it was just the meta model, experiences that I had in my life, they didn't just have a place to put them in place. They were like hanging out on the side. They weren't integrated in. So it was a vehicle for putting them into place and integrating them into my life and a kind of balance. And I never kind of felt so much as the problem-solving aspect of it. In my experience from the beginning, it was really more about this is evolutionary and a little bit revolutionary, which Robert might say more about, because it was challenged. It challenged a lot of beliefs and ideas that were in place at the time.
And of course, this took place in a certain time.
Yeah.
And did the era play a great part in that? Because,
Sure.
it was the 60s, the hippies, we did have
This was just out of it was just coming out of the 60s and the end of the Vietnam War, in fact. And but it was sort of at that peak of that wave. And yeah, it was a time of a lot of change, a lot of questioning, but it was also the beginning of, really the Fritz Perls and SLN had started in the late 60s, and UCSD started in the late 60s, and so a lot of those things started and were sort of reaching a crest at this time in the early 70s. Yeah.
My memory too was it was an interesting time. I mean, it was actually, social revolution was happening around the world, or at least the world that I knew about.
Yeah.
In Europe, Mexico,
And
United
US.
States, and so there was that was that sort of sense. That was sort of the environment, and then the new university, and the man who started the university having a vision of
Dean McHenry.
Dean McHenry, about interdisciplinary connection. Getting the scientists to talk to the social scientists, and the mathematicians to talk to the
Cross-fertilizing
biologists.
different fields.
Exactly, and that cross-fertilization was happening. And at the
Which is
same-
really what NLP is, a cross-fertilization
Yes.
of neurology, linguistics, and
And
programming.
is it then also that because of the contrast, you realize that more that it builds on your awareness of what you're doing and what the other person is doing. So that's what.
Yeah.
Well, I was, like I said, I was 19 years old, something, when I first got started, and I remember going to this first class where John laid out the meta model, and it was the first practical thing I'd ever learned in school. And I started, these were just questions, and I suddenly realized I knew enough about psychology. I realized I was suddenly, with other students and things, asking questions like an experienced psychotherapist, but I'd never studied psychotherapy. So I realized, wow, this is really pretty powerful. I mean, I had enough awareness to understand that, because people were really getting a lot out of what I was doing, and I had no training in it, but I had this tool.
Yeah, I remember Jaap Holm and Anneke Meijer getting you over because they finally found something which related to psychology, which actually worked.
Which actually
they were
worked.
really enthusiastic about it. Okay.
And for me, I think too, it's a time when the whole wave of Eastern thought,
Yes,
was
that's
coming
true.
to the shore here on the West Coast. It was like a big wave of transcendental meditation, and people were looking for the gurus, and I remember it was like this open space. People wanted a guru, and Richard and John really could step right into that space.
But also, I like to point out, it was also exactly the same time that Wozniak and Jobs were getting together in their garage to start Apple. And I mean, so it was in this particular area of the world,
very generative
and
time.
over in Palo Alto at the MRI, Mental Research Institute, that's when where people like Virginia Satir, Bates, and I mean, it was very clear in this part of the world at that time, a lot of stuff was changing. There was a lot of innovation.
Coming from that awareness, because we're talking about an awareness in this particular place of the world.
Yeah.
But coming back to the process of you all working together and kind of creating this NLP, how was the nature of the creative process? Because then you get together, you mentioned the classes, but also there was lots of things going on. How did that work?
My recollection in the beginning, it was very much oriented towards Richard and John.
Yes.
And they would come and they would get these ideas and have us
test them out.
Test them out and go
model
do
it.
something, try something.
Yeah.
But it also stimulated in us this very experimental attitude. Because I can remember later on in NLP, I was always surprised that people were just interested in learning the techniques and teaching them and saying, well, aren't you interested in being creative? I mean, I thought everybody would want to be creative and generate and model, and it's like, no, most people were just interested in feed me, and so I can go do
you have the
something.
latest technique,
Whereas for us, it was really all about curiosity, finding something new.
Instead of how do you make prescriptions?
I mean, it's a really amazing moment, when they would ask somebody, do you want to go to a movie? And they would go, well, let's see. And then have that realization, I wonder if they're actually seeing something up there. And then checking that out and going, yeah, I actually do see something up there. And then you get, well, there's this external clue that gives you a cue, there's something that's happening internally, and asking those questions and then noticing those connections, and then the connection of that to the breathing or the posture, you know, I mean that.
But even more than that, I mean, I think Bandler and Gritter's attitude is definitely very much that you're going to change the whole world with this. I mean, all you need is, I mean, in the beginning it was like, we're onto something nobody else knows about. If you just know how to ask these questions, you would change the whole world. And then when you find eye accessing cues, it was like, if you know that, you can do anything, you can change anything. And we had this feeling, and we would, you know, we'd go work with somebody who had some pretty serious problems and
I mean, they even
make it
would
work.
bring us over to the mental institution, into the locked ward. I mean, we're just these university students, you know, with these two guys, but they would invite us over there and go, show us what you can do with a person that's
psychotic
catatonic,
or
show us what you can
catatonic.
do with a person that's...
So the national creative work, and we followed up on that, was started by Bentley and Gunnar, but then, of course, other things started
Seated, and
So how did
and
that
again,
go?
coming back to the whole field of the
Too,
place.
about the great generosity of spirit. I mean, how could you walk into a place like that or get invited
Well,
to a
that's
place?
what I was meaning. Is that
Yeah.
I think in this particular area at that time, that's why people like Wozniak and Jobs that didn't have college degrees, people were open to, you know, they were
The
open to this
adventure of
idea
that,
that okay, new things are coming and they're not going to come out of the, you know, the expertise.
The
And
ivory
so
tower.
and so all around the place, like in the hospitals and other places, somebody were generous to say, okay, let's give it a try.
see
So
what
it
happens.
wasn't only us; it was the whole
Yeah,
field
the
at that
environment.
time. I think was very open to innovation.
And then I once heard when I was in Santa Cruz that there were these particular bars you would go to and have all great discussions, or was that only related to Richard Bandler?
Well, I remember
Mostly Richard.
Mostly.
I remember Richard going quite often to...
Sir Froggy's.
No, but I know Sir Froggy's, but what is it? The is it the Casablanca? Where is it? Right down on the by the
It's
boardwalk. It's the
Casablanca,
Casablanca,
yeah.
and they have a nice restaurant there. I
They
can
do.
remember going there with Richard. I think it may be the first time I ever met Teresa actually. Todd wasn't with her, but I think I remember he used to hang out.
I don't think NLP so much came out of discussions in bars as much as that it came out of discussions everywhere, and it didn't matter. It wasn't just discussions in a research facility, and it was just everywhere. And that was even the whole idea of it was, you would go to bars because you would see that it was true there, and you would work with people. I mean, we would be working with people in the bar. You know, that would be what sometimes our assignments were. You know.
Yeah.
Go and you'd be reframing somebody or trying to get them to stop drinking or whatever it is that we were supposed to be doing.
So what part played nature in this? Because I remember we were on a very nice campus at UCC. It's beautiful with all the big red trees and the big oak trees. And how did, and I know of course you, but also you, like having this tremendous admiration of how nature works. How did that work for you too?
Well, I mean, for me, I grew up with that, you know, and I grew up with, you know, older siblings and, you know, brothers who had this ability to kind of look at a natural environment and go, aha, yeah, and then walk right out and start to dig and find arrowheads. Because they would go, you know, if I was a Native American, that's where I would have chosen, because you have to be close to the water and you have to have this and that certain rock, you know, to chip and everything. And I was just, you know, I grew up with that kind of, and, you know, a brother who was an engineer but would snorkel around creeks in Missouri and Oklahoma looking for different kinds of turtles, you know, and they would talk about the turtles.
Yeah.
You know?
and for me, I mean, I grew up as, I mean, I was an animal lover and nature lover. I would have never thought I would have been doing what I do now, working so much with people, because I wasn't all that interested in people.
No.
I was in all of my heroes, and this is where I think there is the overlap. My heroes were all the pioneers, but they were people who spent time in nature, leaving a trail. I mean, I realize now that is what I do, but I was much more interested in, you know, I would have been just as happy to go off backpacking in the woods and in nature and not see people. And actually NLP is even what brought me to a deeper appreciation of people. Oh, oh, they're as cool as animals.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yes.
I mean, and you know, even though my degrees are both in, you know, comparative religion and anthropology, I have almost as many credits in marine biology. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we tagged the first elephant cub actually born out at Año Nuevo, and that was born on the mainland because one had not
Yeah.
been, and he spent
Yeah.
weeks in boats in the Channel Islands in the winter doing mammal counts. You
And
know.
I think that was the attraction for us also of Bateson, who really, I think, was also
Such a systemic.
to me, I mean, his, you know, mind and nature was his
Yeah.
thing. That,
So I'm aware of a more limited time frame. So
Yeah.
if we move to
Yeah.
the present, how has all of that, and it has contributed in the way you were approaching NLP and how you came to think about things, and really also specifically you and you.
yeah.
What in your vision has NLP brought into the world? What are you, like, for instance, staying in this particular moment in time, looking back about 35 years of experience where you've been
Almost
contributing,
40.
and you've been contributing. So what is it that you're happy about, that you really feel like, oh, this is a good thing that we brought into the world together?
I'm happy that people like you are here.
Yeah, asking these questions. I mean, I think for me, there's a couple of areas. I mean, always about more awareness, always about opening
Yeah.
up more awareness, awareness about how we function as human beings, how we function with another human being. I think all of that. I think for me, that the missing part in the early days had a lot to do with the body was not as represented as it could be. I mean, it was there in a superficial way, but really honoring it as a representational system and the wisdom that it holds. I think that's something I feel really proud of
Yeah,
to have
to have participated in.
and to have kind of carried that torch, and then, you know, had somebody who had a sensibility and a sensitivity to that, to go, that's important. And
So where did that come from? Because
Well-
I've known you obviously, so I know that you're very much into the somatic mind, but what was there prior to
Dancing.
doing the
I was
dancing?
a
You're
dancer.
dancing.
So the dancing, and
And
what
I would hear
brought-
people say, and I would hear people talk about visual, kinesthetic, and auditory representational systems, and there was a lot about the auditory digital system. There was a lot about the visual system.
the
and
symbolic
quite-
visual.
Yeah, and the visual. And there was quite a bit about auditory tonal, because Richard liked
Was
music. Todd was a
musician.
musician, a serious musician. But the body was posture, and it was a vessel that held emotion. And most people were trying to just change their emotions, but it wasn't kind of fully represented as a system that has knowledge, it has memory, that codes, that decodes. And
So it's not
That
only the
connects,
ability
that-
to move in your body, but also
To
The
use the
somatic
body,
wisdom
that
that
there's
you do
knowledge
know
in the
a lot
body.
more than
Yeah.
you do now in
Yeah. And to use the body to learn. And it was there in a way in modeling, you know, which was about,
Yeah.
you know, John would say the only way you can truly model is,
Is
you know,
second position first,
So,
yeah.
But, you know, you can talk about that, but not really get the wisdom of that. Yeah. And I think the other is community
Yeah.
and field. I think, even though it's talked about different.
You know,
but for
I
me,
think that,
it's,
I think interestingly, a lot of stuff that we do today was sort of, I would say it was implicit in our role models.
Totally.
And I mean, I think Erickson's idea of a creative unconscious included a somatic intelligence and a community intelligence, but it just wasn't explicit. So I think today, I mean, I think I would say who I am today, was completely formed in those early days. But there was a lot of unexpressed stuff that was there. I mean, it was such a very fertile time. And, you know, then we continue to sort of put more structure on those things
And model
that were there.
different aspects of the
And-
human experience
Yeah.
and build
So,
those
so
models.
the keywords I get from that is the curiosity, the awareness of the importance of awareness,
curiosity.
the somatic mind, not only to be flexible in terms where do you want to move in the future,
Right.
but also where do you come from and what is already there as a wisdom in the body. So those are the things I've personally also experienced to
Yeah.
really have
Yeah.
benefited from that. which of the many different contributions, it more or less relates to the same questions. You have delivered yourself and you would like to see others, because you modeled others, but others are now also big time modeling you. And what is the thing, if they take one thing from me and deliver it into their own NLP trainings, what would you like to
Have them model
people
from
like to
me
see?
or from
Is that the same, or is that?
No,
am I
for me it's
understanding the
different.
question? Yeah, I'm not sure I'm
Like,
understanding the question.
For me, the question is about what is
Sorry
it,
about that.
if somebody was going to model something from you, I mean, or from me, I mean, for each of us, what would be our answer to the question, what would I want to be modeled from me and brought into other people's trainings and to
okay.
bring into their trainings?
I think we should answer that for each
Yeah,
other.
that would be very, very nice. Yeah, that would be great.
I think for Robert is his amazing creativity, his amazing desire to create models, to model and to embody them and to live them and to spread them around. That's what I would say about
And what I would say about Judy, it's her amazing gracefulness and humor combined. So there's element, grace, harmony in
Harmony.
movement, action, but also then the humor. So I think the two combined create a sparkly light.
I always think of Gregory Bateson, who said that, Albert Einstein could easily work by himself. He didn't really care if anybody knew what he was doing. He entertained
Right.
himself, and he was happy to do that. I'm definitely about generative collaboration. I mean,
Exactly.
for me, I've often teased Robert about, I feel like a muse sometimes because I just want to sort of stimulate.
Yeah,
And
I
watch
think
something
you're really
grow
good
and
at
then
that.
go to another one and kind of stimulate,
Yeah.
And I remember
It's like touching upon
yeah,
people. Just
and I love that. And people doing that with me. I mean, Robert
Yeah.
has certainly been in that
Yeah.
role with me for many, many years. I mean, all the way back to the beginning. I mean, there's something that, generative that happens.
And I think for me, it's all about connection,
Yeah.
And I remember Gregory once said, for love to survive, wisdom must have an effective voice. So giving voice to and like creating connection through that.
So how can we as a community work together to further develop that idea of generative collaboration. And also
Well,
making love her.
I think people
Love.
have to be able, I think people have to be willing to find value in generative collaboration so that, I kind of think about when I was at university and the graduate students, they were like in fear all the time of paranoia that somebody's going to steal their original research or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's something about diminishing the sense of the me, my, I, mine, and be willing to sort of open up to that generative space with another human being where, Robert says
Yeah.
so well, oxygen and hydrogen alone are two elements, nice, but together they make water, and I think that, for me, that would be the answer.
The others, male and female make baby. Those two things.
That's why I
it's
love Buddha, he was both,
one,
you know?
1 + 1 equals 3.
She was both.
No, but I think for me, and I think Judy and I share this. I wouldn't be. There are things that I can do on my own. I'm okay, I can do things on my own. But the joy in the work,
Yeah.
for me, the joy comes through connection and creation with others. So it's connection and creation with others there's nothing
Yeah.
that can beat that.
I agree with that.
There's nothing more, nothing more satisfying than that.
And I just don't think it can be approached with fear or a desire to hold on.
Well, they say there's
So
love.
there has to be what
Yeah.
then? I've got my own answers, but I really want to know yours
Yeah.
from that curiosity.
Yeah.
So you don't get it from holding on to the fear and
No.
holding on, but
But you get it from releasing that and connecting.
Well, they say in the Course in Miracles, there's two basic emotions. There's love and there's fear.
Yeah.
And for me, the question I always ask myself, and I have it on the walls in my house, are, what is love asking of me? What is it that love is asking for here? And I think that's
And the other emotions are all reflective. Oh, I'm angry about that.
That's a fear, or I'm joyful,
I
that's
felt
love.
disrespected because of that. But fear and love are direct.
Yeah,
you
I
know.
can
That's
really
right.
relate to that because
They're-
if you walk into the nature, you have this instant trust that from in winter the trees will grow their
They will
leaves
grow.
again. There's this
Yeah.
instant trust, and it's so easy to love nature. And if you bring those two and connect into the tree,
That's why you are the territory. And not just a
Territory
map.
is us.
We are the territory.
We're going to the last question,
Okay.
and I'm asking you to take a huge step forward in time. So imagine
Okay.
you're being one of the trees. You know, there will be many learning trees over at the campus, but imagine you being one of the learning trees at the campus, and it's 2112. So it's 100 years from now. Put yourself in the place of 100 years from now. I'm doing NLP with you guys.
Okay.
So-
All right.
So, and if you are really happy, really, really happy, have this deep sense of satisfaction, of feeling, well, not so much satisfaction as well as gratefulness. What has happened in the last 100 years? What contributed to that?
Say the last part again.
What has happened
In the last
100
100
So
years.
2112.
2112.
What has happened from
Oh, got it. In that 100 years.
in that 100 years?
That mean that we have somehow contributed
that you
to,
have,
or
in
that
terms of
we've.
NLP and how kind of you came
Well,
from your.
I think the thing that just sort of came up for me kind of right away was, as I can see at this time, there were some real basic pillars of models, you know, like Erickson or like Bateson or like Virginia Satir. And I can see how people who captured those models and wanted to bring more of their selves there, how those pillars got bigger. And I can kind of see, with or without me or without Robert or John or Richard, how those are going to continue to get bigger. And that there's going to
Right.
be more and more and more of those pillars that are going to come stronger and stronger and stronger. So I think in the abilities, the capabilities to be the models, the capabilities to sit and dream about who the new heroes are, to dream about, you know, the new myths, that there be an awareness of that in a much, much, much deeper way than there is now. In connection to the system, the field. People will have a deeper understanding that we are the field, and the field is us.
And I think for me,
That's what I see.
I think it resonates a lot with that. You know, I always like to say, you know, well, I want to create a world to which people want to belong. And I think, well, what would this world look like? I mean, that people want to belong. And I think it has this sort of two parts. One is that people are really more and more living their own lives, right? So they're expressing their own uniqueness. They're bringing, there's a deeper and deeper satisfaction of people from the sense of very, you know, personal, like self-sponsorship. And it's through that people actually have a greater transpersonal awareness.
Yeah.
So it's through my acceptance and my recognition of myself as a completely valuable, unique individual, nobody else like me, that from there, then there's this place, as Judy was saying, where it's like, it's a we. So it's this kind of, it sounds maybe a little paradoxical, that people are more and more themselves, and the diversity is more and more rich and clear. And at the same time, then that diversity is contributing to something beyond the individual. So there's a kind of like a torus, you know, a vortex that is, and so we are, through our unique creative contribution, it's a little bit like artists, people creating more and more of their own unique music, and only an individual can do that. Einstein said that only the individual can create, but the meaning of that creation can only come from its contribution to something that's beyond the individual.
Thank you so much for that, because watching you as well as you, and you're having your own representation of that and living that and showing that, it's also like allowing, it's like it's both there, it's connected at a point in terms of energy, and it has also its unique
Individual
form.
form, yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. for that.
I know, I just want to close it. One of the reasons is that you have been profiting, of course, a lot of Milton Erickson and Virginia Satir, and we love to see all the old tapes and kind of look at ourselves. One of the reasons in terms of your retirement, although I know you're thinking about it because people it was such a beautiful
Semi-retirement.
cultural night yesterday. It is for that reason that we also want to preserve this as a legacy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very important to me.
Who would have thunk it?
Yeah.
And when
Thank you.
somebody
Would have
said,
thunk
like,
it.
you know, if I were to describe you, I'm not going to describe you because you'll be there for a length of time. But in terms to honor your decision to make more space in your life and also be connected as well, because you can't not be connected. Your spirit is there. Your wisdom is
No,
already
you're just there.
Yeah. I'll be
But
still
to
doing
me,
food.
to me, you have the wisdom of a grandmother, the strength
Thank you.
of a mother,
Yeah.
the loving care for a sister, and the playfulness of a child. And for that,
Thank you. That's
bless
very
you.
beautiful.
thank you. Yeah.
That's why Cheetos would say, my grandmother, my mother, my sister, my child,
My wife,
lover,
and then he
my
goes,
wife.
no, you have to say it. My wife, he says.
And it's
My
so
wife.
nice that you keep on showing those. You know, you are like a dancer moving through those kind of different positions, and by doing that, you kind of push the buttons that people are like, okay, let's think
Okay,
about this,
let's
and
do
get
it.
that wisdom.
Good.
So thank you so much for this interview, and
You're welcome.
thank you.
Thank you so
you
much,
for
because I know
talking.
that
Thank
the time today, especially the last day, is really short.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Oh yeah, we've got to
No,
be
pleasure.
up there, and you need
Pleasure.
to. You got to eat.